My name is Rebecca Chen, and 3 weeks ago, I discovered my husband of 2 years had been slowly poisoning me with antifreeze. I'm standing in my kitchen in Cedar Falls, Iowa, holding a bottle of blue Gatorade that tastes like betrayal. The cornfields outside my window stretch endlessly under September's dying light, and somewhere in this house that smells of vanilla candles and lies, Marcus is humming while he showers. He thinks I don't know yet. He thinks I'm still the trusting wife who drinks whatever he brings me after my grueling shifts at the agricultural insurance office. But I know. And now, I'm going to destroy him. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because every woman deserves to know the signs before it's too late. 4 months ago, I was Rebecca Chen Morrison, 34 years old, living what I thought was a blessed life. I'd worked my way up from filing clerk to senior claims adjuster at Heartland Agricultural Insurance, the biggest employer in our county. Growing up as the only Asian kid in Cedar Falls wasn't easy, but I'd carved out respect in a town where your word still means something, and folks remember your grandmother's apple pie recipe. My office sat on the 3rd floor of the old grain exchange building, where I spent my days investigating crop damage claims and helping farmers rebuild after disasters. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. When tornado season hit and wiped out a family's entire soybean harvest, I was the one who made sure they got paid fast enough to plant again next spring. I loved the precision of it, the detective work of separating legitimate claims from fraud. My desk was organized chaos, color-coded files, 3 coffee mugs from different farm co-ops, and a small jade plant my coworker Janet had given me for luck. The morning routine was sacred check, weather reports review, overnight claims, grab coffee from Mabel's Diner downstairs, where the sheriff's deputies gathered to gossip about weekend arrests. The work kept me busy enough that I barely noticed I was 32 and still single until Janet started her not-so-subtle matchmaking campaign. "Rebecca, honey," she'd say, adjusting her reading glasses while sorting through hail damage photos, "you can't marry your job. Though Lord knows it pays better than most men around here." Janet was 63, had buried 2 husbands, and considered herself the office sage on matters of the heart. She'd been after me for months to try online dating, but the thought of explaining my work to strangers over dinner made my skin crawl. How do you make crop insurance sound romantic? Then, Marcus walked into my office on a Tuesday morning in May, carrying a manila folder and wearing a smile that made me forget I had a conference call in 10 minutes. He was filing a claim for his uncle's dairy farm. Lightning strike had killed 17 head of cattle and fried their milking equipment. Marcus stood about 6 feet tall, with sandy hair that caught the light streaming through my windows and hands that looked like they knew real work. But it was his voice that hooked me, soft-spoken, with just enough Iowa drawl to feel like home. "Ma'am, I hope you can help us," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Uncle Ray's been farming that land for 40 years. This storm nearly broke him." I pulled up the file, trying to ignore how his green eyes followed my movements. "Professional, Rebecca. Stay professional. Lightning strikes are tricky," I said, scanning the initial photos on my computer. "We'll need veterinary reports, equipment appraisals, and a detailed timeline of events." Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Whatever it takes. Ray raised me after my parents died. That farm is all we got left of family." Something in his voice made me look up from my screen. There was grief there, carefully buried, but still raw around the edges. I knew that feeling. I'd lost both my parents in a car accident when I was 25. Leaving me alone in a town where everyone else had deep roots, and Saturday night dinner with cousins. "I'll fast-track the investigation," I heard myself saying. "Your uncle shouldn't have to wait for payment while his herd suffers." The smile that spread across Marcus's face was like sunrise after a long night. "Thank you, Miss Chen. You don't know what this means to us." Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into Ray Morrison's claim with unusual dedication. I drove out to the farm personally, something I rarely did for standard claims. The Morrison place sat on 340 acres of rolling hills dotted with black and white Holsteins. Ray was indeed a weathered man in his 70s, with hands like leather and eyes that held 4 decades of Iowa weather. "Marcus talks about you constantly," Ray said, as we walked past the charred remains of his milking parlor. "Says you're working miracles for us." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Just doing my job." "No," Ray shook his head. "This is above and beyond. Marcus is lucky to have someone like you fighting for him." Marcus showed up at my office twice more during the investigation, always with new documentation, but lingering longer than necessary. On his 3rd visit, after I'd approved the full claim amount, he asked me to dinner. "There's this steakhouse in Waterloo," he said, fidgeting with his cap. "Nothing fancy, but they make a mean prime rib. Would you maybe want to celebrate Ray's good news?" I should have said no. Dating clients was against company policy. But something about Marcus felt different, genuine in a way that was rare in my experience. Plus, Janet had been practically shoving me toward the door every time he visited. "Just dinner," I said, "to celebrate your uncle's recovery." That first dinner lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything: his childhood on the farm, my parents' immigration story, the way Cedar Falls had changed since we were kids. Marcus was a year older than me, had tried college, but came home when his parents died in a farming accident. He'd been helping Ray ever since learning the business and dreaming of expanding into organic dairy. "Most people think farming is simple," he said, cutting into his steak. "But it's science, business, gambling, and prayer all rolled into one. You're betting everything on weather you can't control, in markets you can't predict." I found his passion infectious. Here was someone who understood the weight of other people's livelihoods, the way I felt responsible for every claim that crossed my desk. 3 months later, he proposed in Ray's cornfield during the August sunset, offering me his grandmother's ring in a future I'd stopped believing in. The wedding was small, just immediate family and close friends at the Methodist church, where I'd been baptized. Ray walked Marcus down the aisle since his parents were gone, and my college roommate flew in from Chicago to stand as my maid of honor. Our honeymoon was a long weekend at the Amana colonies, staying at a bed and breakfast that served German food and locally brewed beer. We toured the furniture workshops and bought a handmade quilt for our new home. A 2-story farmhouse Marcus had been renting from Ray, complete with a wraparound porch and a kitchen that caught the morning light. For 8 months, life felt perfect. Marcus would leave before dawn to help Ray with milking, and I'd drive to town for work. Evenings meant dinner on the porch, watching the corn grow taller as summer deepened into fall. Marcus talked about modernizing the dairy operation, maybe starting a cheese-making side business. I encouraged him, even suggested we could take out a loan, using my steady income as collateral. "You believe in me," he said one night, reaching across the table to take my hand. I never had that before. But by February, something shifted. Marcus grew distant, distracted. He'd snap at small things, like if I forgot to pick up his favorite beer or left dishes in the sink. When I asked what was wrong, he'd shake his head and say the farm was struggling, that Ray was talking about selling. Maybe that would be good. I suggested one night. "You could start fresh somewhere else. We could move closer to town, find you a job with regular hours." The look he gave me was pure ice. "You don't understand the first thing about family legacy." That's when the headaches started, and the nausea, and the strange metallic taste in my mouth that no amount of mouthwash could wash away. Marcus became attentive again, bringing me Gatorade and soup, rubbing my shoulders when I came home, exhausted from work. "You're working too hard," he'd say. "Let me take care of you." I thought I was lucky to have such a caring husband. I had no idea he was slowly killing me. The symptoms got worse. By May, I was missing work regularly, too dizzy to drive safely. Janet covered for me when she could, but eventually I had to tell our supervisor, Dale, that I needed medical leave. "You look terrible, Rebecca," Dale said, studying my pale face across his cluttered desk. "Take all the time you need. The job will be here when you're ready." That afternoon, I made an appointment with Dr. Sarah Martinez at the Cedar Falls Medical Clinic. She was new in town, a young doctor with serious eyes, who actually listened when I described my symptoms. "How long has this been going on?" she asked, making notes in my chart. 3 months, maybe 4. It started gradually. Dr. Martinez ordered blood tests, thyroid panels, even an MRI. Everything came back normal, which only made me feel crazier. "Have you changed anything in your environment?" she asked during my follow-up visit. "New cleaning products, different water source, dietary changes." I shook my head, feeling frustrated and defeated. Marcus sat beside me, holding my hand and asking thoughtful questions about treatment options. The perfect, concerned husband. "We'll figure this out," Dr. Martinez promised. Sometimes these things take time to diagnose, but time was something I was running out of. By June, I could barely keep food down. Marcus insisted on driving me everywhere, claiming I wasn't safe behind the wheel. He wasn't wrong. My vision blurred randomly, and my hands shook like I had Parkinson's. That's when I started paying attention to patterns. The sickness was always worse after Marcus brought me drinks. The headaches spiked after meals he'd prepared, and there was something in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. Not concern, but calculation. 3 weeks ago, I pretended to be asleep when Marcus came to bed. Through barely opened eyes, I watched him slip a small bottle from his pocket into the nightstand drawer. My heart pounded as I waited for his breathing to deepen, then carefully slid the drawer open. The bottle was unmarked, filled with clear liquid that smelled like nothing at all. I screwed the cap back on with trembling fingers, my mind racing. What was it, and why was Marcus hiding it? The next morning, while Marcus was at the farm, I drove that bottle to the only person in town I trusted completely. The person I trusted was Tommy Nakamura, the only other Asian face in Cedar Falls, and my closest friend since high school chemistry class. Tommy ran the town's only independent pharmacy, a cramped storefront wedged between the hardware store and a beauty salon that hadn't updated its hairstyle posters since 1987. Tommy took one look at my shaking hands and the unmarked bottle, then locked his front door and flipped the sign to closed. "Rebecca, what the hell is going on?" He led me behind the prescription counter, past shelves lined with medications that could heal or kill, depending on the dose. I told him everything. The months of sickness, Marcus's sudden attentiveness, the way my symptoms peaked after he'd been caring for me. Tommy's face darkened as he held the bottle up to the fluorescent light. "I need to test this," he said quietly. "But Rebecca, if this is what I think it might be, what do you think it is?" Tommy met my eyes. "Ethylene glycol, antifreeze. It's odorless, nearly tasteless, and in small doses over time. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. My legs gave out. Tommy caught me guiding me into his desk chair, while the room spun around me. Antifreeze. Marcus had been poisoning me with antifreeze. How long would it take to kill someone? I whispered. Depends on the dose and frequency. But Rebecca, if you've been ingesting this for months, you need to get to a hospital now. This stuff causes permanent kidney damage, brain damage. I shook my head, surprising myself with my clarity. Not yet. I need proof. Real evidence. Tommy stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You need medical treatment. Tommy, listen to me. I gripped his arm. If I go to the hospital now, Marcus will know I figured it out. He'll destroy whatever evidence exists and disappear. I've spent my career investigating insurance fraud. I know how these predators work. They're always one step ahead, unless you catch them completely off guard. 3 days earlier, I'd started my own investigation. While Marcus thought I was too sick to function, I'd been gathering information with the methodical precision that made me good at my job. I'd found Marcus's real name, Marcus Thompson, not Morrison. Ray wasn't his uncle. Ray was his Mark, an elderly man, whose farm Marcus had been slowly bleeding dry through forged checks and fraudulent loans. The marriage certificate I'd treasured was filed under a false identity. The medical records were even worse. I'd cross-referenced Marcus Thompson with hospital databases across 3 states. In Wisconsin, he'd been married to Carol Thompson, who died of sudden kidney failure after a brief illness. In Minnesota, Sarah Lindstrom, also kidney failure, also after marrying Marcus under another assumed name. 2 dead wives, both with my symptoms. Both who trusted a charming man who promised to take care of them. But the most damning evidence sat in our home computer password-protected files Marcus thought I'd never find. He'd been researching life insurance policies, specifically the waiting periods for payouts on accidental deaths versus natural causes. Tommy's test results confirmed my worst fears. The bottle contained concentrated ethylene glycol, enough to kill me 10 times over, if administered correctly. We have to call the police, Tommy insisted. With what evidence a bottle of antifreeze that could belong to anyone? Marcus is careful, Tommy. He's done this before. I need him to incriminate himself. That night, I pretended to be sicker than ever, barely able to lift my head from the pillow, when Marcus brought me another blue Gatorade. Drink up, sweetheart, he said, his voice soft with fake concern. Dr. Martinez called today. She wants to run more tests tomorrow. I took a small sip, letting most of it dribble down my chin. Can't. Taste is so weird. Marcus's eyes flickered with something that might have been excitement. I know, baby, but you need to stay hydrated. After he left the room, I poured the Gatorade into a mason jar and hid it in my closet. Evidence. Meanwhile, I'd been building my case file like any insurance investigation. I documented everything: times, dates, witnesses, financial records. I'd even driven to Ray's farm when Marcus wasn't there, recording the old man's confused rambling about missing checks and forged signatures. Marcus handles all the paperwork now, Ray had said, his weathered hands shaking as he tried to remember. Says it's too complicated for my old brain. But I swear I never authorized that equipment loan. Ray wasn't Marcus's uncle. He was Marcus's victim, an elderly man with early-stage dementia, being systematically robbed by someone he trusted. The pattern was becoming clear. Marcus targeted vulnerable people, elderly men like Ray, isolated women like me. He gained their trust, gained access to their resources, then eliminated them when he'd taken everything he could. But I wasn't going to be victim number 3. On Friday morning, I called Janet from my burner phone. a cheap flip phone I'd bought with cash, while Marcus thought I was at the doctor. "Rebecca, honey, you sound terrible," Janet said. "Dale's been asking about you. When are you coming back?" "Soon. I promised. But I need a favor. Can you pull some old files for me? Anything involving Morrison Farm or Ray Morrison, going back 5 years." "Of course. But why?" "I can't explain yet. But Janet, if something happens to me, I need you to give those files to the police. There's more going on here than anyone realizes." The files Janet pulled painted a disturbing picture. Marcus had been filing fraudulent claims on Ray's behalf for 2 years, collecting insurance payouts for damage that never occurred, equipment that was never purchased, livestock that didn't exist. He'd stolen over $200,000 from the insurance company, and probably twice that from Ray's personal accounts. My marriage wasn't a love story. It was a business arrangement. Marcus had targeted me because I worked in insurance, because I could fast-track his claims and provide him with inside information about the company's investigation procedures. Everything had been a lie. The romantic dinners, the heartfelt talks about family legacy, even the sex, all of it calculated to make me trust him completely. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. Sunday evening, while Marcus was supposedly helping Ray with evening milking, I broke into his pickup truck. Hidden under the spare tire, I found his real driver's license credit cards in 3 different names and a composition notebook filled with details about his previous victims. Carol Thompson, 38, worked at a bank in Madison, married Marcus after a 6-month courtship, died after 8 months of marriage, leaving him $150,000 in life insurance and a mortgage-free house. Sarah Lindstrom, 41, managed a credit union in Duluth, married Marcus after meeting him at her church, died after 10 months of marriage, leaving him $200,000 in life insurance, plus her retirement savings. Rebecca Chen Morrison, 34, works in agricultural insurance. Current project, estimated payout, $250,000 life insurance plus property assets. Under my name, he'd written, "Symptoms responding well. Increased dosage after next doctor visit. Natural causes, critical for maximum payout." I photographed every page with my phone, my hand steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Marcus had killed 2 women and was planning to kill me all for money that wouldn't even buy him a decent house in most places. But the notebook contained something else. Addresses and phone numbers for his next potential targets. Single women in small towns across Iowa and Illinois. Women he'd been researching online. Women who didn't know a predator was hunting them. As I drove home, my phone rang. Marcus. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling? I'm picking up your prescription from Tommy's place, then stopping for groceries. Need anything special?" The casual tone made my skin crawl. He was planning to increase my dosage tonight, probably hoping to finish the job before I could get suspicious. "Just some of that soup I like," I said, forcing weakness into my voice. "The chicken noodle kind." "Of course, baby. I'll be home in an hour. Why don't you rest until then?" After hanging up, I called Tommy. "He's coming to pick up a prescription. What did you give him?" "Sugar pills in a prescription bottle." "But Rebecca, you can't keep playing this game. One miscalculation and you're dead." "Tonight," I promised. "I end this tonight." I spent the next hour setting up cameras throughout our house. Tiny devices I'd ordered online and hidden in picture frames, behind books, inside fake electrical outlets. If Marcus was going to try to kill me tonight, I wanted it all on video. Then I prepared my own surprise. When Marcus returned with groceries and my prescription, I was waiting in bed, weak and grateful as always. He made soup, brought me pills, sat beside me, with that concerned husband expression I'd once found so comforting. "Dr. Martinez thinks you need stronger medication," he said, handing me 3 pills instead of the usual 2. "These should help you sleep better." I palmed the pills, pretending to swallow them. "Thank you for taking such good care of me." His smile was warm, loving, completely genuine-looking. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed he truly cared about me. "Get some rest," Marcus said, kissing my forehead. "I'll check on you later." But he didn't go to bed. Through barely cracked eyelids, I watched him sit in our living room, checking his watch every few minutes, waiting for the increased dose to finish what months of careful poisoning had started. At 11 p.m., he crept back into our bedroom. I controlled my breathing, feigning the deep sleep of someone who'd never wake up. Marcus stood over me for a long time, then pressed his fingers to my neck, checking for a pulse. When he seemed satisfied, I was unconscious. He made a phone call. "It's done," he whispered into his phone. "By morning she'll be gone. Natural causes just like the others. The life insurance should pay out within 30 days. Everything was being recorded. Marcus had just confessed to murdering me and 2 other women, all captured on devices he didn't know existed. But I wasn't done with him yet. As he headed to the kitchen, probably to dispose of evidence, I quietly slipped from bed and followed him. Marcus stood at our sink, washing out the Gatorade bottle he'd used to poison me, humming softly to himself. The same tune he'd hummed on our wedding day. That's when I stepped into the light, very much alive and holding my phone. "Hello, husband," I said. "We need to talk." "Sta!" Marcus spun around the Gatorade bottle, slipping from his hands and shattering on our kitchen floor. For a split second, his mask fell completely away, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. Then, just as quickly, the concerned husband was back. "Rebecca, you scared me. What are you doing up? You should be resting." "Should I?" I held up my phone, the recording app still running. "According to your phone call a few minutes ago, I should be dead by now." The color drained from his face, but Marcus recovered faster than I'd expected. His whole demeanor shifted, shoulders squaring, voice hardening. "I don't know what you think you heard. I heard you confess to murdering me and 2 other women, Carol Thompson, Sarah Lindstrom. Ring any bells?" Now his mask was completely gone. The man standing in our kitchen was a stranger, someone who'd been hiding behind Marcus Morrison's gentle smile for 2 years. "You always were too smart for your own good," he said quietly. "That's going to be a problem." I stepped backward, suddenly very aware that I was alone in the house with a killer. But I'd prepared for this moment. "Tommy knows where I am," I lied. "If I don't call him every hour, he's calling the police." Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth I'd ever heard from him. "Tommy's not going to be a problem much longer. Neither are you." He moved toward me, but I was ready. The baseball bat I'd hidden behind the refrigerator was in my hands before he could react. "Stay back," I warned. "I've already sent copies of everything to the FBI. Your notebook, the insurance records, photos of the antifreeze. Even if you kill me tonight, you're finished." That stopped him cold. "You're bluffing." "Am I check your email?" For the first time, real fear flickered across his features. While he'd been planning my death, I'd been systematically destroying his future. Every piece of evidence, every recorded conversation, every financial record was already in the hands of authorities across 3 states. But Marcus wasn't done yet. "You think you're so clever," he snarled, circling our kitchen island like a predator. "But you don't know everything. Ray's dead, Rebecca. Has been for 3 days. I made it look like he wandered off and fell in the creek. Tragic accident for a man with dementia." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Sweet Ray, who'd walked me through his fields, and called me the daughter he'd never had. Marcus had murdered him too. And Tommy. Marcus continued enjoying my shock. Let's just say his pharmacy might experience an unfortunate break-in tonight. These small-town druggists, they keep so many dangerous chemicals around. One little accident. Rage replaced fear in my chest. This monster had killed Ray, was planning to kill Tommy, all to cover up his crimes. But his gloating had given me the final piece of evidence I needed. You just confessed to murdering Ray Morrison, I said, holding up my phone again. That's being recorded, too. Marcus lunged for me. Then, but I was already moving. The baseball bat connected with his shoulder, sending him stumbling backward into our kitchen table. He roared in pain and fury, but I was already out the back door, running toward my car. Behind me, I heard Marcus crashing through the house, probably looking for his keys or a weapon. I had maybe a 2-minute head start before he came after me. I drove straight to the Cedar Falls Police Station, a squat brick building on Main Street that I'd driven past thousands of times without ever imagining I'd need their help. At 11:47 p.m., the parking lot was empty except for 2 squad cars and a motorcycle that belonged to Officer Jim Bradley, whom I'd known since high school. Jim was dozing at the front desk when I burst through the doors, still clutching my phone and wearing pajamas. Rebecca, what in the hell? I need help, I gasped, setting my phone on his desk. My husband just tried to kill me. He's a serial killer. I have proof. For the next hour, I downloaded 2 years of evidence onto the police department's computers. Audio recordings of Marcus confessing to 3 murders, photos of his notebook detailing previous victims, financial records showing systematic fraud, video footage of him poisoning my drinks. Jim called in Detective Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed woman who'd transferred from Des Moines the year before. Together, they listened to every recording, studied every document, asked me to repeat my story 3 times to check for inconsistencies. This is the most thorough investigation I've ever seen from a civilian, Detective Santos said finally. You've built a case that would take our department months to assemble. I had months, I replied, and I knew he was planning to kill me tonight. At 1:15 a.m., they sent units to arrest Marcus at our house. But he was gone. His truck was missing from our driveway, and a search of the house revealed he'd taken his go bag, closed cash, and false identification documents I hadn't known existed. Marcus had planned for the possibility of exposure, but he hadn't expected me to be quite so thorough. We've issued an APB, Detective Santos assured me. His truck license, his description, everything. Plus, we're coordinating with Wisconsin and Minnesota police about the other murders. But I wasn't satisfied with waiting for Marcus to be caught. He'd threatened Tommy, and I knew Marcus well enough to believe he'd follow through on revenge before trying to escape. I need to check on my friend, I told Jim. Tommy Nakamura at the pharmacy. Marcus threatened to hurt him. We'll send a unit. No, I was already heading for the door. I'm going with you. We found Tommy's pharmacy, dark and seemingly undisturbed. But Tommy wasn't answering his phone or the door to his apartment above the shop. Jim used his master keys to let us in through the back entrance. The pharmacy had been ransacked. Pill bottles scattered across the floor. The cash register smashed open, chemicals spilled everywhere. But it wasn't a random burglary. This was too targeted, too vicious. We found Tommy in his apartment tied to a chair and barely conscious. His face was swollen and bloody, but he was alive. Rebecca, he mumbled through split lips. He was looking for you. Said you'd ruined everything. The paramedics arrived within minutes, loading Tommy into an ambulance, while Detective Santos processed the crime scene. Marcus had left behind evidence of his rage. Fingerprints on broken glass DNA under Tommy's fingernails from where he'd fought back. "He's getting sloppy," Santos observed. "Desperation makes criminals careless." But I knew Marcus better than that. This wasn't desperation. It was strategy. He'd attacked Tommy to send me a message, to let me know that anyone I cared about was vulnerable. He wanted me to know he could reach anyone anytime. And he was probably right. As dawn broke over Cedar Falls, I sat in the police station drinking stale coffee and watching Detective Santos coordinate a multi-state manhunt. Marcus Thompson Cheer Morrison had vanished like smoke, leaving behind a trail of bodies and shattered lives. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait," Santos replied. "And we hope he makes a mistake." But I'd spent 2 years married to Marcus. I'd studied his patterns, his methods, his psychology. He wouldn't make careless mistakes. He'd made a career of staying one step ahead of consequences, unless I could predict where he'd go next. "Detective," I said, pulling up my phone, "I think I know where he's headed." Marcus's notebook had contained more than just details about his past victims. It had addresses and personal information for potential future targets, women he'd been researching across Iowa and Illinois, lonely women with good jobs and substantial assets, women who fit his preferred victim profile. And at the top of his list was Jennifer Walsh, a 39-year-old bank manager in Burlington, Iowa. According to Marcus's notes, he'd already made contact with her through a dating app, using photos I now realized he'd stolen from Ray Morrison's deceased nephew. "He's not running," I explained to Detective Santos. "He's moving on to his next target. Jennifer Walsh doesn't know she's in danger." Santos was already reaching for her phone. "We'll warn her, put her under protection." "It won't work," I interrupted. "Marcus is too good at this. He'll adapt, wait until security is down, or just move on to someone else. The only way to stop him is to catch him in the act." What I was suggesting was dangerous, probably illegal, and definitely stupid. But it was also the only plan that had a chance of working. "I want to be the bait." Detective Santos stared at me, like I'd suggested juggling live grenades. "Absolutely not. You're a civilian, and you're already traumatized. We can't put you in harm's way." "I'm already in harm's way," I countered. "Marcus won't stop hunting me until one of us is dead. And while you're playing by the rules, he's already moved on to his next victim." We argued for an hour. Santos insisted they could handle Marcus through conventional police work. I pointed out that he'd evaded capture for over a decade by being smarter than conventional police work. Finally, FBI agent Rebecca Torres arrived from the Des Moines field office, drawn by the multi-state implications of Marcus's crimes. Agent Torres was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my entire story, without interruption, reviewed every piece of evidence, then made a decision that surprised everyone. "She's right," Torres said, simply. "This guy is too sophisticated for standard takedown procedures. He's been successful because he chooses his hunting grounds carefully and never deviates from his pattern. If we can control the environment, use his own methods against him." "You're talking about using a civilian as bait," Santos protested. "I'm talking about using his intended victim to trap him before he can kill again," Torres replied. "Mrs. Morrison knows his psychology better than anyone. She's already proven she can stay ahead of him intellectually." The plan was complex and risky. I would approach Jennifer Walsh, explain the situation, and convince her to help us set a trap. We'd let Marcus make contact, let him think he was in control of the situation, then close the net when he moved to attack. "What if he smells the setup?" Santos asked. Then we abort and try something else, Torres said. But this is our best shot at stopping him before he disappears completely. 2 days later, I was sitting in Jennifer Walsh's living room in Burlington, trying to convince a skeptical bank manager that her online boyfriend was actually a serial killer. "This is insane," Jennifer said for the third time, staring at the photos I'd shown her. "Derek seems so normal, sweet even. He sends me flowers." "That's exactly how he seemed to me," I replied, "right up until I found out he was slowly poisoning me with antifreeze." Jennifer was everything Marcus looked for in a victim. Successful, isolated, emotionally vulnerable. After a recent divorce, her house was perfectly maintained, her financial situation stable, her social circle limited to work colleagues and a few family members who lived out of state. "Show me the messages," I said. Jennifer reluctantly pulled out her phone, scrolling through weeks of romantic texts from Derek Morrison. The pattern was identical to how he'd courted me. Gradual escalation of intimacy, promises of a future together, careful probing about her finances and family connections. "He wants to meet this weekend," Jennifer admitted. "Says he's finally ready to take our relationship to the next level. That's when he'll make his move," I said. "Jennifer, you have to trust me. I know this man, and I know what he's capable of." Agent Torres had positioned surveillance teams throughout Burlington, but Marcus was too smart to walk into an obvious trap. The plan required Jennifer to act completely normal, to meet Marcus as planned, but in a controlled environment where we could monitor everything. The meeting was set for Saturday evening at a quiet restaurant downtown. Jennifer would wear a wire, and I would be positioned at a nearby table with a clear view of their interaction. FBI agents would be stationed throughout the restaurant and surrounding area. "What if he recognizes you?" Jennifer asked as we reviewed the plan. "He won't," I said, though I wasn't entirely certain. I'd changed my appearance dramatically. Cut and dyed my hair, lost 15 pounds from months of being poisoned, and would be wearing glasses and clothing completely different from my usual style. Saturday evening arrived gray and drizzly, typical October weather in Iowa. I took my position at the restaurant 30 minutes early, ordering coffee and pretending to read a book while actually watching every person who entered. At 7:30, Jennifer arrived nervous, but playing her role perfectly. She chose a table in the center of the dining room exactly as planned and ordered a glass of wine to steady her nerves. Marcus walked in at 7:45. Even expecting seeing him across the room made my heart race. He looked exactly the same. Same easy smile, same confident walk, same casual clothes that suggested modest success without appearing threatening. To anyone watching, he was just an attractive man meeting his girlfriend for dinner. But I knew better. I could see the careful way he scanned the room, the practiced charm he turned on like a switch when Jennifer smiled at him, the predatory patience in his movements as he settled into the chair across from her. Through my earpiece, I could hear their conversation clearly. "Jennifer, you look beautiful," Marcus said, reaching across the table to take her hands. "I've been looking forward to this all week." "Me too," Jennifer replied, her voice only slightly strained. "It feels so good to finally meet in person." They ordered dinner, making small talk about work and the weather, while Marcus deployed his considerable charm. If I hadn't known what he was, I would have found him likable, even attractive. He was everything a lonely woman could want. Attentive, funny, interested in her thoughts and dreams. "I have a confession," Marcus said as they shared dessert. "I've been thinking about our future together, about making this permanent." Jennifer's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. That's wonderful to hear. I know it's fast, but when you know, you know. I want to take care of you, Jennifer. Make sure you never have to worry about anything again." The words sent ice through my veins. They were almost identical to what he'd said to me during our courtship, the same promises that had seemed romantic, but were actually threats. Marcus was moving faster than we'd anticipated. Instead of the slow grooming process he'd used with his previous victims, he was trying to accelerate the timeline. Maybe because he knew the police were closing in, or maybe because Jennifer represented his last chance to score before disappearing permanently. "I'd like that," Jennifer said carefully. "But shouldn't we take things slow, get to know each other better?" Something flickered behind Marcus's eyes, and I tensed in my chair. He was reading her response, analyzing it for signs of suspicion or resistance. "Of course," he said smoothly. "I'm just excited about the possibilities. Maybe you could come see my place next weekend. I'd love to cook for you." Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Torres's voice. "That's the invitation. He's trying to isolate her." Jennifer handled it perfectly. "I'd love that. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," Marcus replied. "And maybe an overnight bag, if you're comfortable with that." The trap was set. Marcus had taken the bait, invited Jennifer to his hideout, where he planned to begin the process of destroying her. What he didn't know was that we'd be ready for him. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus stood and helped Jennifer with her coat. For a split second, his eyes swept the dining room, and I thought he might have seen me. I forced myself to keep reading, turning a page naturally while my heart hammered against my ribs. But Marcus's attention was already back on Jennifer, his focus laser sharp on his intended victim. They walked out together, and I counted to 60 before following at a safe distance. Outside, Marcus was saying goodbye to Jennifer, beside her car, leaning in for a kiss that looked romantic to anyone watching. But I could see his other hand briefly touching her neck, likely applying some kind of drug or poison that would make her more vulnerable during their next meeting. "Did you see that?" I whispered into my microphone. "Affirmative," Torres replied through my earpiece. "We got it on camera. Whatever he just did to her, it'll be additional evidence." Jennifer drove away, and Marcus walked to his truck, parked a block away. Our surveillance teams followed at a distance as he drove to a motel on the outskirts of Burlington, a rundown place that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask too many questions about identification. "That's his base of operations," I told Torres as we regrouped at the FBI command post. "He's probably got supplies there, maybe evidence from other victims." "We could take him now," Torres said. "With the evidence you've gathered plus what we filmed tonight, we've got enough for conviction." "No," I said firmly. "If you arrest him now, you'll never find all his victims. Marcus is too smart. He'll lawyer up and never tell you about the women whose bodies haven't been found yet. We need to catch him in the act of attempted murder. We need a confession." Torres studied me carefully. "You really want to see this through to the end." "I want to see him destroyed," I admitted. "Completely and utterly destroyed, so he can never hurt anyone else." What I didn't tell Torres was that I'd been planning my own endgame separate from the FBI's operation. Marcus had taken 2 years of my life, killed at least 3 people I knew about, and probably more I didn't. Justice through the legal system felt insufficient. I wanted revenge. The next few days were a careful ballet of surveillance and preparation. Marcus had no idea the FBI was watching his every move, but he was being cautious anyway, probably from instinct developed over years of criminal activity. Jennifer, meanwhile, was struggling with her role in the operation. The reality of what Marcus intended to do to her had shaken her badly, and she was having second thoughts about the plan. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked during one of our planning sessions. "What if he kills me before you can stop him?" "He won't," I promised, though I couldn't be entirely certain. Marcus needs time to establish control before he begins the killing process. We'll have multiple opportunities to intervene, but privately, I was making my own preparations. Marcus had taught me that sometimes justice required taking matters into your own hands. Thursday night, I broke into Marcus's motel room while he was out scouting Jennifer's house. He'd been careless with his security, overconfident that he'd evaded the authorities. His room was a shrine to his crimes: photos of victims, detailed plans for Jennifer's murder, and containers of various poisons, including the ethylene glycol he'd used on me. I planted my own surprise among his supplies: a tiny GPS tracker that would let me find him anywhere, and a digital recorder that would capture everything he said during his final crime. But I also took something of his: a small vial of concentrated strychnine, enough to kill a person within minutes. Insurance, I told myself, just in case the FBI plan went wrong. Saturday arrived gray and cold, with the promise of rain before evening. Jennifer was scheduled to drive to Marcus's house. Actually, a remote cabin he'd rented under a false name 20 miles outside Burlington. The FBI had the place surrounded, but Marcus didn't know that. At 4 p.m., I was positioned in a concealed surveillance van with Agent Torres, watching as Jennifer knocked on the cabin door. Marcus answered with a bottle of wine, and that same charming smile, welcoming her inside, like a spider inviting a fly into its web. Phase 1 complete. Torres spoke into her radio. Subject has taken the bait. Through hidden cameras and Jennifer's wire, we watched Marcus begin his seduction routine. He'd prepared dinner-lit candles, created the perfect romantic atmosphere for what he intended to be Jennifer's last night alive. But something was different about Marcus tonight. He seemed nervous, distracted, checking the windows frequently and asking Jennifer odd questions about whether anyone knew she was there. "He suspects something," I murmured to Torres. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just being cautious." As the evening progressed, Marcus grew more aggressive. He kept refilling Jennifer's wine glass, trying to get her intoxicated enough to make her compliant. But Jennifer had been trained to dump her drinks when he wasn't looking, maintaining sobriety while appearing drunk. "I feel so dizzy," Jennifer said, playing her role perfectly. "Maybe I should lie down." "Of course," Marcus replied, his voice taking on a predatory edge. "Let me help you to the bedroom." That was the signal. As Marcus guided a fake stumbling Jennifer toward the back of the cabin, FBI agents moved into position around the building. But Marcus was smarter than we'd given him credit for. Instead of taking Jennifer to the bedroom, he suddenly spun her around and pressed a knife to her throat. "I know you're wearing a wire," he snarled into her ear, loud enough for us to hear. "And I know the FBI is out there. So here's what's going to happen." Everything went wrong at once. "Nobody moves or she dies," Marcus shouted, pressing the knife harder against Jennifer's throat. "I know you're listening, Rebecca. This is all your fault." Through the cabin windows, I could see Jennifer's eyes, wide with terror, as Marcus used her as a human shield. He'd figured out the trap, but instead of running, he'd decided to make his final stand with maximum damage. "How did he know?" Torres whispered, speaking into her radio to coordinate with the tactical team. But I already knew. Marcus was too good at reading people, too experienced at manipulating situations. Something about Jennifer's performance had tipped him off, or maybe he'd spotted one of our surveillance positions. "Rebecca," Marcus called out, knowing I was listening, I know you're out there. Come inside and talk to me, or your friend dies right now. Don't even consider it, Torres hissed. But I was already moving toward the van door. He's not bluffing, I said. Marcus has killed before, and he's got nothing left to lose. If I don't go in there, Jennifer dies. We have snipers positioned. He's using her as a shield. You can't take the shot without risking her life. I stripped off my wire and bulletproof vest, knowing Marcus would check for them. This had to look like a genuine surrender, or he'd kill Jennifer out of spite. The walk to the cabin door was the longest 30 yards of my life. Every step brought me closer to a man who'd spent 2 years slowly murdering me, who'd killed at least 3 other people, who now held an innocent woman's life in his hands. But I wasn't the same naive woman who'd fallen for his charm 2 years ago. I'd learned his methods, studied his psychology, and prepared for this moment in ways he couldn't imagine. Marcus opened the door with Jennifer still pressed against him, the knife never leaving her throat. Up close, I could see the madness in his eyes, not the controlled predator I'd married, but something wild and desperate. "Hello, wife," he said, that familiar smile playing at his lips, despite the circumstances. "Did you miss me?" "Let her go," I said simply. "Your problem is with me, not her." "Oh, but Jennifer here was going to be my final masterpiece," Marcus replied, dragging her deeper into the cabin's living room. A bank manager, with access to so much money, such a trusting nature. She would have funded my retirement very nicely. "Before you killed her, you mean?" Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the cabin's wooden walls. "Death is just the final step, Rebecca. The real art is in the process, earning their trust, gaining access to their resources, watching them slowly realize they've been betrayed. You should appreciate that. You had a front row seat to my greatest performance." "Poisoning me with antifreeze wasn't art," I said, taking a careful step closer. "It was pathetic, a coward's weapon." His grip on the knife tightened, and I saw Jennifer wince as the blade bit into her skin. "Careful, Rebecca. I'd hate to accidentally hurt poor Jennifer here." But I'd noticed something Marcus hadn't. Jennifer wasn't as helpless as she appeared. Her eyes were alert, focused, and she'd been subtly shifting her weight, preparing to move, when the opportunity presented itself. "You want to know the truth?" Marcus continued, his voice taking on the manic quality of someone who needed to confess. "Carol and Sarah were just practice. I was perfecting my technique, learning what worked and what didn't. But you, Rebecca, you were supposed to be my masterpiece. The perfect victim. Intelligent enough to be challenging, isolated enough to be vulnerable, wealthy enough to make it worthwhile. So why did you get careless?" I asked, genuinely curious despite the circumstances. "Why did you leave evidence where I could find it?" Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "I got bored. 2 years of playing the devoted husband, of pretending to care about your little insurance job, and your pathetic dreams of a happy ending. Do you know how exhausting it is to maintain that level of deception? So you got sloppy, started leaving clues, because you wanted me to figure it out. I wanted to see the look on your face when you realized how completely I'd fooled you," he admitted. "That moment when trust turns to horror, it's intoxicating, better than the actual kill." Behind him, I could see FBI agents positioning themselves at the cabin's windows, but they couldn't move as long as Marcus held Jennifer hostage. "Well, congratulations," I said. "You got your moment. I figured it out. I felt the horror, and now I know exactly what kind of monster I married. What happens now?" Marcus considered the question, his eyes never leaving my face. "Now we all die together. A murder-suicide. Jealous ex-husband kills wife and her friend, then turns the gun on himself. Very dramatic, very final. "Except you don't have a gun," I pointed out. "Details." Marcus waved the knife dismissively. "I'm very creative with improvisation." That's when Jennifer made her move. She'd been a high school athlete, and 20 years later, she still had the reflexes. In one fluid motion, she dropped her weight, spun away from the knife, and drove her elbow into Marcus's solar plexus. Marcus stumbled backward, gasping, but recovered faster than I'd hoped. Instead of going after Jennifer, he lunged at me with the knife fury, replacing calculation in his movements. I was ready for him. 2 years of marriage had taught me Marcus's physical patterns, his strengths and weaknesses. He was right-handed, favored his left leg due to an old injury, and always telegraphed his attacks with a slight shoulder movement. As he came at me, I stepped aside and brought my knee up hard into his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, but Marcus wasn't finished. He grabbed a heavy candlestick from the mantel and swung it at my head. This time I wasn't fast enough. The candlestick caught me across the temple, sending stars exploding across my vision. I staggered backward, tasting blood, as Marcus advanced with murder in his eyes. "I should have killed you months ago," he snarled, raising the candlestick again. "Made it look like an accident. But I wanted to savor your slow death watch you waste away. Like you did to Carol and Sarah." I gasped, trying to clear my vision. "Like I'm going to do to you right now." But as Marcus brought the candlestick down, FBI agents crashed through the cabin's front door. The tactical team had waited as long as they could, but with both Jennifer and me in immediate danger, they had no choice but to breach. Marcus spun toward the agents, and in that moment of distraction, I saw my opportunity. The vial of strychnine I'd taken from his motel room was still in my pocket. In the chaos of the assault, with agents shouting commands and Marcus frantically looking for an escape route, I could end this permanently. Justice through the legal system would mean years of trials, appeals the possibility of him somehow escaping punishment. But justice through poison would be immediate and final. My hand closed around the vial, but then I looked at Jennifer, shaken but alive, and at the FBI agents who'd risked their lives to save us both. I thought about Tommy recovering in the hospital, about Ray Morrison's family, finally learning the truth about his death, about all the future victims Marcus would never be able to hurt. The legal system wasn't perfect, but it was justice. Real justice, not revenge. I let go of the vial and stepped back as the agents tackled Marcus to the floor. "Marcus Thompson, you're under arrest for the murders of Carol Thompson, Sarah Lindstrom, and Ray Morrison, and the attempted murders of Rebecca Chen, Morrison, and Jennifer Walsh," Agent Torres announced as they cuffed him. Marcus looked up at me from the floor, blood running from his nose, his expression pure hatred. "This isn't over, Rebecca. Even in prison, I'll find ways to hurt you." "No," I said quietly, "you won't, because I'm not the same woman you married. I'm not your victim anymore." The trials took 18 months. Marcus was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the proceedings, authorities discovered evidence of at least 6 other victims across 4 states, women whose disappearances had been classified as missing persons cases or accidental deaths. Jennifer recovered fully from her ordeal and started a nonprofit organization to help women identify and escape from predatory relationships. She credits our experience with teaching her the warning signs she'd been trained to ignore by a lifetime of social conditioning. Tommy returned to work after 3 months of recovery, but he sold the pharmacy and moved to Florida to be closer to his daughter's family. Life's too short to stay in a place that holds bad memories," he told me during his farewell party. As for me, I went back to work at Heartland Agricultural Insurance, but with a new perspective on what really mattered. I'd spent my career investigating fraud and deception, but I'd been blind to the predator living in my own home. 6 months after Marcus's conviction, I was promoted to senior fraud investigator, with a focus on cases involving domestic financial abuse. It turns out my experience with Marcus had given me insights into criminal psychology that made me extremely effective at identifying predatory patterns. Mark, my old supervisor, had retired by then, replaced by a younger woman named Sarah Chen. No relation, despite the shared surname. Sarah had heard about my case and specifically requested me for her team. "You have a unique understanding of how these criminals think," she explained during my first performance review. "That makes you invaluable in protecting other potential victims." The work was satisfying in ways I hadn't expected. Every case I solved, every fraudster I helped catch, felt like a small victory against the Marcus Thompsons of the world. But the best part of my new life was something I never could have anticipated. Detective Santos had stayed in touch after the trial, initially for professional reasons, but gradually becoming a friend. Maria was divorced, had 2 teenage daughters, and understood the challenge of rebuilding life after betrayal. We started having coffee once a week to discuss cases where insurance fraud intersected with criminal investigations. Then, coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekend activities with her daughters. Weekend activities became something that felt suspiciously like dating. I never thought I'd trust anyone again. I admitted to Maria one evening as we sat on my porch watching the corn grow in the fields beyond my yard. "Trust isn't about never being hurt," she replied. "It's about choosing to be vulnerable with someone who's earned that privilege." Maria had definitely earned it. She'd seen me at my absolute worst, traumatized, paranoid, driven by revenge, and somehow found something worth caring about. A year later, we moved in together, blending our lives in ways that felt natural and right. Maria's daughters accepted me as part of their family with the adaptability of teenagers who'd already survived their parents' divorce. I kept the farmhouse where Marcus and I had lived, but we turned it into something completely different. Maria's daughters decorated their rooms with posters and fairy lights. We converted Marcus's office into a craft room where we worked on weekend projects. The kitchen, where he'd prepared poisoned drinks, became the heart of a home filled with laughter and honest conversation. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about the alternative timeline where Marcus had succeeded in killing me. Jennifer would be dead too, along with however many other victims he would have claimed over the years. Tommy might have died in that pharmacy fire Marcus was planning, but that timeline didn't happen because I'd refused to be passive in the face of evil. I'd used my skills, my intelligence, and my determination to not just survive, but to protect others. The girl who'd grown up bouncing between foster homes, who'd clawed her way to stability and respectability, had faced the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I received a letter from him in prison. Maria wanted to throw it away without opening it, but I insisted on reading it. I needed to know what he had to say. The letter was exactly what I'd expected. Manipulation disguised as remorse, attempts to make me feel guilty for destroying his life, veiled threats about what might happen when he got out of prison. I read it once, then fed it into my paper shredder and forgot about it. Marcus Thompson had taken enough of my mental energy. He'd consumed 2 years of my life with his lies, another year with his trial, and he wouldn't get another minute. These days, I wake up in a house filled with people who love me exactly as I am. I go to work protecting other people from predators like Marcus. I come home to family dinners and homework help and the small joys of ordinary life. The woman Marcus married, naive, trusting, desperate for love, is gone. In her place is someone harder and smarter, but also more compassionate. Someone who understands that strength isn't about never being vulnerable, but about surviving vulnerability and choosing to remain open to genuine connection. Sometimes people ask if I regret marrying Marcus, if I wish I'd seen through his deception from the beginning. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain he caused, the lives he destroyed, the time he stole from me. But I don't regret becoming the woman who was strong enough to stop him. Every predator who's been caught because I recognized their pattern, every victim who's been saved because I knew what signs to look for. Every night I sleep peacefully beside someone who loves me genuinely. That's all built on the foundation of surviving Marcus Thompson. He thought he was destroying me. Instead, he forged me into something unbreakable. And that might be the sweetest revenge of all.